All right, so we're joined for our final guest of the school year, all the way from Houston, Texas, Jonathan Husband, product manager with Hewlett Packard. We thank you so much for taking some time for us today. I've got a room full here with me at Velma Jackson High School. We're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools: Rosa Scott, Madison Central, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So we are in the STEM career cluster, our final career cluster of the year. Thank you so much for taking some time for us today.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me. I
All right,
really
so before
appreciate
we
it.
talk about, oh yeah, we're very happy to have you. Before we get into all you've done, what all you do with HP, you are from you're there in Texas, but you are from Jackson, went to Mississippi
Mhm.
State, and spent some time on the West Coast. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are now.
Okay, so I was born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi, and I always tell people one thing I've learned about growing up in Jackson is that it teaches you. I learned to be resilient. I learned to just kind of go with the flow. I think growing up, you don't realize the condition you're in until you step out of it.
There
But
you
when you're
go.
in it, you just it become you become you're kind of molded by it. And so for me, um, I tell people this story. When I was growing up, I was originally supposed to go to Bailey Magnet, right? Because they had 6th through 12th grade. I know that's a long time ago. But the year I was supposed to go through 6th grade, they started to reduce the junior high, and they only go to high school. So I ended up going to Brinkley Middle School for 6th grade. And at that point, I got exposed to, at the time, there was a program called the Algebra Project. And so this was a project started, civil rights leader Robert Moses out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, came down to
Yeah,
Jackson, Mississippi, and started
yep.
the program at Brinkley Middle School and at Lanier High School. So I got an opportunity to be in that program. And from there, it just kind of opened me up to so many like possibilities, right? I never would have thought of moving to the West Coast or moving around things like that. But that program allowed me to travel. We learned mathematics through playing games, so it heightened my love for mathematics and STEM and just learning. So if there's one thing I could give the students from that experience is always, be open to being exposed to new things. I think that's the big thing that I learned from that. So um, went through that program, went to Brinkley Middle School, then went on to Jim Hill High School. I was in the IB program over at Jim Hill, International Baccalaureate program. Uh, After graduating Jim Hill, I then went on, was at the University of Mississippi for a year and a half because at the time I wanted to major in pharmacy, pharmaceuticals, right? So you go through the whole process of going through the chemistries and the biologies,
Uh-huh.
and I like chemistry, and I like science, and I like math, but that was just too much chemistry for me. And then I found out early on that that wasn't my learning style as well. I'm
Yeah.
more of a um, hands-on applying, working, trying to figure things out. And that career path was a lot of memorization. I have a pretty good memory, but for certain things. Um, so I went there for a year and a half, and then I transferred to Mississippi State to major in engineering. But when I first got there, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And if you can imagine, this was 2000 2001. I didn't really know what an engineer was. I had only knew engineers. They, I don't even know what my ideal of an engineer was. I thought
Wow.
yeah. So just with little research, my thing was, all right, who makes good money? Something I could do to where even if I don't like it, I'm at least gonna make some good money. Growing up, you always hear, oh, doctor, lawyer. Those are the professions, when you don't know what you want to do, it's kind of like, oh well, you can be a doctor or a lawyer because you're smart and you know math and science, but do you enjoy it? So I majored in engineering. Now my first major in engineering was chemical engineering. And now that was still too much chemistry for me. Um, so I was like, okay, I don't like chemistry. I figured out through majoring in pharmaceuticals and pharmacy and chemical engineering. I don't really like chemistry as much as I thought I did, but I did like mathematics. And through a friend of mine, he was a civil engineering major, and he challenged me. He's like, "Man, why don't you come over here and major in civil engineering?" And I was like, "Well, what do they do?" Had no idea what civil engineers did at the time. He was like, "Oh, well, we can do pretty much anything. We work on bridges, we can work on roads, we check the water, um, buildings, structures, environmental." And I was like, "Man, that was for me, having all those options really intrigued my mind."
Absolutely.
So started majoring in civil engineering, and I really enjoyed it because every class seemed like a different major. Right, you go to one class, you're studying about transportation. You go to another class, you're studying and learning about bridges and buildings and structures and steel and concrete. You go to another class, you learn about environmental. Go to another class, you learn about water quality. So it just fit into my want to just learn different things. Right. And I think that was key as well, learning early on that, I learn better and I enjoy what I'm doing when I'm touching a lot of different things. All right. So graduated Mississippi State with a degree in civil engineering, and I focused on traffic and transportation at the time.
Yep.
So graduated. One other thing that I will say is when you're in college, internships are key. Not only do they give you opportunity to work and get experience and make some money, but they also give you a chance to build some relationships. And you'll find out as you start to, graduate high school and get into college, even in college, relationships will be key moving forward. So I interned every summer in college, but it was that last internship that I got exposed and got a chance to create relationships with some of the officials down at Georgia DOT, working through a consulting company. So we were working on, at the time, they're installing these lights on the interstate. And so me and a couple of other interns, we were literally get in the car, drive with a stopwatch, and time ourselves from exit to exit and see how long it took us. So that was our infield research. So doing that, got a relationship with Georgia DOT, but also got a relationship with the consultant that hired us for the internship. They offered me a job right out of college.
Wow.
So I moved to Atlanta, traffic and transportation engineering, doing traffic studies. So this involved literally going out, watching traffic, seeing how it reacted to certain conditions, and then making the adjustments either through redesigning the roadway or adjusting the timing of the signal lights. So I did that for about a year and a half. And then around 2009, 2010 is when we had this economic recession. And so ended up getting laid off, right? And that was a difficult time for me because you just graduated. You think I've got this engineering degree. If anybody can find a job, I can find a job. Or people will be looking for engineers. They'll want you, which was not the case. I spent an entire year looking for a job. That was my career.
Wow.
For a year looking for a job. So lesson I learned from there is to always learn new things, right? And be open to trying new things, right? Just because you have a degree in something doesn't mean that's, even if it's temporary, right? You can always carve your path out until you can do what you want to do. The other thing I learned through that was that, interviewing became my job, but it was also helping me, build relationships. It also helped me to talk to people, speak the language. I got very good at sales because I'm selling myself. So I think having one skill set, even if it's in sales, learning how to sell yourself to people and your idea to people is a very great skill set to have. So I did that. Ended up getting a job with a huge engineering firm to come work on some of their construction team, right? So again, my background is civil and environmental engineering. I've taken classes. I can kind of do a little bit of everything, not specialize in anything yet. So I work with an engineering firm doing construction on airports. And so through there, I created relationships with Federal Aviation Administration staff that would come out to the site. So they would come out, see the work that we were doing. We talk about the project. I would meet with them on a regular. And so through that relationship, after ending my stint with the consulting firm, I got an offer to come work for the federal government. So I was working with the federal government, doing some project and program management, overseeing some airports in the Southwest region initially. And then I took a promotion that took me to California. All right. So
That is
out
awesome.
there, I was overseeing about 20 to 30 airports in the Northern California region.
Wow.
Yeah. And so when I say overseeing, you know, a lot of these airports come into the federal government looking for funding to build out runways, terminals, do infrastructure projects, upgrade their satellites and radars and GPSs and things like that. And so, you know, as a program manager for the federal government, I oversaw how that funding was distributed. Right. So we work on behalf of the federal government and, you know, citizens' tax dollars, but we also help the airport get what they need, because travel, aviation, airports are very important travel mode in the U.S. So I did that for, I was the federal government for about 8 years, I want to say, maybe a little bit less. And so I'm in the Bay Area, and if you don't know anything about the Bay Area, it's very expensive. All right, so I left Texas and moved to the Bay Area. Okay, I'm sorry, I was in Atlanta to Texas when I initially came up with the federal government. Texas to Oakland in the Bay Area, very expensive. So my plan at that time was, hey, I'm gonna stay here for a year, and then I'm going to move to DC, because working in the federal government, you get that DC experience. It allows you to elevate your career pretty quickly, right? You move to DC. But I really enjoyed the Bay Area, so I was like, well, I want to stay here for a little while. So my plan was, all right, first I got to find a job that's going to pay me enough to stay here. And then it was hard to break into a new industry out there. So I was like, well, how can I leverage my experience to stay here, but find a job that's going to pay me enough? So I ended up leaving the federal government and moving over to local government with the city and county of San Francisco, based at the airport, working on some of their projects, on their infrastructure projects. So through there, managing projects as we're receiving funding for the federal government. So previously I was giving out funding, and now I'm working on the side where I'm actually receiving funding. So again, leveraging that experience to take an opportunity with the city and county of San Francisco, build out some infrastructure projects. So they're building out roadways. We replaced the air traffic control tower at the airport, worked on some terminal building stuff, things, building out some tenant improvements. So let's say a tenant like a Starbucks wants to come into the airport, right? They need a space. So we would come in and we'd map out the space, install everything that they needed, go through the plans and specs, make sure everything was up to code, so then they could lease the space from us, bring in their equipment, and then operate their business. That was, I really enjoyed that, right? It gave me a chance to kind of see things move. And one thing I do enjoy about construction is that you see things being built, right, on a day-to-day. Every day you come out, it's something new, right? Some careers, or a career that I could have taken, or career path I could have taken, was, you know, as an engineer, I could have did a lot of design work, right? And for me, sitting behind a computer wasn't what I enjoyed, right? So I enjoy being in the field. I enjoy seeing things being built. The other thing to that is I enjoy talking to people, right? So being out in the field allowed me to communicate with people on a day-to-day basis. So I did that for about 5 years, and then I'm in Oakland, California, in San Francisco Bay Area. And if you know anything about the Bay Area, it's what they call Silicon Valley, right? It's the hub of technology. So I'm seeing all these companies be created. I'm seeing all this technology being introduced, and I'm getting this itch, right? I'm like, okay, I want a piece of this, you know, this tech world. I want to jump into tech. How do I leverage my skill sets to get into this tech industry, right? So at the time, I'm in construction, and I'm going through some of the job boards, like, what can I do part-time to get into technology? And initially, I came across this company The posting was confidential. Do you want to build great products? That's all it said. Do you want to help us build great products? And in the description, it said we want somebody with a background in construction and project management. And that was it. And I was like, okay, it's a tech company. I don't know what they're building yet, but I'm going to apply. I applied. I got a call back. The HR said, yes, I saw your resume. We'd love to bring you in for an interview. We're designing some very unique things. We just want to bring you in, kind of talk to you about it, see what you think. So I go, there's this building, black building, no signs on the doors. I go in, you step in, it's all white, like a clean area.
Wow.
So I get in, before you go through the second door, there's this iPad, says, please sign this NDA, right? Non-disclosure agreement, you can't talk about anything. I'm not gonna talk about it now, but I'm not gonna talk about the technology, but I'll talk about kind of what we were doing. Sign it, we go in. This company was designing torpedoes to launch into space so that the torpedoes could carry satellites into space.
Wow.
So again, there's this world that you don't even think about, right? You think about the technology that we use, cell phones, laptops, Wi-Fi, GPS, right? All of these are satellites, right? They feed off of satellites in space. The thing about satellites in our older technology is by the time we would build the transportation to take a satellite into space, the technology on the satellite is already outdated.
Yep.
So right now, the satellites that we're using, the technology that we have here are far advanced in satellites that we're using, right? So this company said, hey, if we can figure out a way to put these satellites in space quicker and cheaper, we've got something. So essentially, they built a way to launch satellites into space. The guy that owned the company, he's in the Guinness Book of World Records as developing a process. He has a process, the highest speed of an object on Earth. And the way that, I don't know if it still stands, but at the time it was, I don't know how to, if I'm describing it right, he could spin an object the fastest on Earth.
Wow.
That was his claim to fame. And I've seen it work. It worked. And so they would bring people in from the Department of Defense to NASA, and everybody would come in and kind of see this hub at work. So you're probably wondering, like, what is this guy in construction? What am I going to do there? Right. So they needed someone, because this was a massive object. They needed someone to design the concrete pads in which it's set on.
Dang.
So they brought me in to help design those pads. Right. So figuring out what footage that we need, how far do we need to dig down, how much concrete and steel needed to go into the pad. So again, working for a technology company, but leveraging my civil environmental background. So I did that for about 6 months. And then I said, okay, well, I can't continue to do this part-time and have my full-time job. I'm just gonna have to jump out and do something full-time, right? So then the opening came open with an agricultural tech company. Right. And so this company was building vertical food farms using robotics.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the companies, you could go to their website. The company's name is Plenty. I worked for them for about a year. And so as an engineer, I was responsible for building out their facilities in which these robotics and agriculture went inside of.
Wow.
So again, using my engineering background, construction background to get into the tech world. So I did that for a year, and then I said, okay, I want to really get into tech, right? I've been working doing the construction side, but how do I actually get into the tech side of things? So if you remember, when I first graduated, my concentration was in traffic and transportation. Couple that with being in the tech space, and I will say, if you want to get into tech, it's easier to get into tech in a role that you want if you're in that space in any capacity. So then there's this company they're doing automation, transportation automation, where they are taking emergency vehicles, light rails, and buses and manipulating the traffic lights in order to get people to the destination quicker. So I saw
Wow.
that post, applied, ended up working for that company by the name by the name of Light. And so, as a project manager, as product manager in that role, I'd work with different cities to implement this software that would essentially help them get their buses from point A to point B quicker, help get emergency
Wow.
vehicles from start to finish quicker. So you think about getting a ambulance or a fire truck to its destination quicker. We're talking about saving lives. You think about getting a bus. You know, a lot of times people don't ride public transportation because it's not reliable. You know, if you've got to be
Yep.
somewhere at 8 or 9, I can't chance taking the bus if I know it's going to be late. But if we can get those schedules back on track, we can get more people back on buses, therefore getting more cars off the road, reducing accidents, reducing emissions, things of that nature. So that was our mission with Light. Um, about a year ago, same thing with 2009. You know, tech companies started to kind of go away, right? We've got increase in inflation, what's going on in the market. Um, Banks aren't lending out money, so ended up getting laid off from there. But this was the different, right? I had acquired all of these skill sets in these different industries, and so I didn't really panic like I did in 2009. Right?
Yeah.
So I kind of sat back, took that opportunity to travel a little bit, and then because of my skill set, someone reached out to me from Hewlett Packard and asked would I be interested in a role. All right.
Wow.
So again, if I can give you anything from there, always make yourself marketable.
Yep.
I think it was, I went on LinkedIn website, said, "Hey, I'm looking for this is what I'm looking for. Recently got laid off. This is who I am." Right. And I think it was the vulnerability in that message, but also being open to let people know that, hey, I am looking for something. Someone reached out to me, said, "Hey, we got a product manager role open. I like what you've done with this company. Would you like this role?" Ended up getting a job with HP. Um, so I've been at HP for a little bit over a year, product manager. Most recently, I took a promotion to a technical delivery manager. So
Wow.
still on the product side, I work with the product, but I work more so with the customer now, right? And understanding the technology and what we deliver, using AI and machine learning, and delivering that to the customer. So I know that was,
Absolutely.
that's I've had a pretty extensive background, to say the least,
Well,
and work in industries.
you mentioned a couple things I think are extremely important. First of all, even if somebody is not interested in going into tech, wherever you decide to go to college or community college, you mentioned about the networking and the internships.
Mhm.
So getting involved in student organizations, and I'm not talking, if you want to do the fraternity thing or sorority thing, that's great. They got a lot of great organizations for that. But finding great organizations like NSBE. I know Mississippi State has a
Mhm.
great NSBE chapter, or whatever you major in. Find something that can help you network within that major and get you plugged in with the right people, and do the internships. A lot of these places hire interns as a test to see who they can hire full time.
Mhm.
A lot of internships will turn into employment. So it is amazing how much, because kids say, I'm going to go to college and I'm just going to go to class. The GPA is important, but there's a lot more to it other than just having great grades. And then
Yeah.
you talked about selling yourself and the sales part of it. Now, tech especially, right now, every field is using technology, and the people that are using the technology are not trained in technology. Because you mentioned about public safety. You
Mhm.
have you have you have hospitals, you have fire departments, police departments using state-of-the-art technology. These people are not trained in technology, they're trained to save lives. So you have
Mhm.
to be the person that can explain, look, here's what you're getting from us. And you got to be able to talk, you got to be able to sell, because you can have the best technology in the world, but if you can't sell it, nobody makes any money. So
Right.
that skill is so underrated, because and I can speak for every other teacher. These kids get so upset when we make them present in front of the class. And I think it's this entire generation, they're so stuck in their phone, but they can't get up in front of a group and say, look, here's what you're getting from us. That is a great return on your investment. And I just
Yeah.
think that really is lost because even as a tech professional, you have to be the expert in the technology that your company has.
I think that is a really great point. I think, again, stepping out of your comfort zone, right? Presenting. Like I said, I got laid off and I grew up very shy and not wanting to talk. I think going through certain programs and having to present opened me up a little bit, but it wasn't until I got laid off and my job was to find a job. And again, this was free everything through the internet, right? This is when you had to walk into a company with your resume and
Oh
talk to
yeah.
people, right? So you either you open yourself up to learning to speak to people now and present, or you're gonna be forced to learn it at a later date, right? And I think if I had been comfortable selling myself, presenting who I was early on, my outcome would have been a lot different, and my road to finding a new opportunity would have been a lot easier.
Yep.
But again, I had to learn that. It took a year. I got really good at speaking to people and talking to people and communicating with people. Um, and it's like I said, it's one skill set that's very underrated. It's probably the most underrated skill set is being able to talk to people and sell yourself. Not necessarily sell a product, but sometimes sell an idea
Yep.
or sell people on who you are. I think that's very important.
Yeah, if a company has 1,000 resumes, you got to make yours stand out. I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
Um, Now, something else you talked about, getting into tech. Now,
Mhm.
obviously, are getting into engineering, and we have a robotics and engineering academy here in Madison County Schools. We have one on campus at Ridgeland High School. We have a robotics engineering academy at our career center and an
Mhm.
IT academy at our career center. So there are ways that you can get IT and engineering tech skills before you ever graduate high school. And then I know you're familiar with the community colleges here. You can get 1 or 2 year certifications
Mhm.
getting these state of the art technology training. So if somebody wants to get in, or even the military is also another very underrated path to get into tech and engineering. So
Yeah.
with what you see at HP and what you've seen in these other tech jobs, is this necessarily something you would have to have a degree in to get your foot in the door in this field?
No. And I'm the perfect example. My degree is in civil environmental engineering. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about roadways and buildings and air quality and soil and water. But I work in tech, right? So it has a lot to do with your ability to learn, right? How teachable are you, right? And skill sets you can pick up here and there, right? I've learned, working as a project manager on these jobs, right? I've learned different methodologies. When I say methodologies, I mean different ways of managing different projects.
Yep.
Learned that. I've learned, through just kind of self-taught, right? Learn the basics of computer programming. These are free, right? YouTube. I've learned, you know, uh, how to take a project and break it into pieces, right? Which is more familiar with the tech world versus the infrastructure world, right? They have different methodologies. So a lot of these skill sets, again, you can pick up anywhere. You don't necessarily have to major in software engineering. Now, if that's what you want to do, that's perfectly fine. But I've seen people uh, major in something completely different that had nothing to do with tech. Took a few classes, became proficient in it, and these jobs are paying them six figures. Right? So again, my path, I went to Mississippi State University. If I were to go back, knowing what I know now, probably would have did community college. There are a lot of benefits to going to community colleges. One, it's a lot cheaper. You get your core classes out of the way.
Especially now.
Especially now, a lot cheaper. You get your core classes out of the way. The classes are smaller, so you get to build that relationship with your professor, right? And when you think about needing references, right, to do things later on, right, you get that relationship with your professor. The class is smaller. You make connections with the people in your class. And listen, a calculus equation at a university, it will be in a book there. It's in the same at a community college, right? There's no change, right? Math is math wherever you go. You just want to make sure you set a good foundation, right? And if you decide to go to community college or you decide to go to the military or university, right? Making sure that you get that good foundation. And we're talking specifically tech, but in math and science, but anything, right? Whether you decide to major in engineering or business, um, business business majors are very important in the tech world as well, right? Because we have to understand how do we sell a product, how do we talk to people, and things of that nature. So again, foundation is key. Um, Not necessarily important where you go. A school is just a place with a name on it. It's all about the effort that you put into it.
Yeah, we have another guest of this class who works at the Department of Revenue,
Okay.
but he manages the servers, and he doesn't know anything about finance. His background is not in anything financial, but this is a server that can't go down. So he's a tech professional, and he said out of his own mouth, he said, "We'd much rather hire a 19-year-old that has certifications with the programs we run over a person that has a college degree." And that's coming straight out of his mouth. And this is a state employee. So again, we're not discouraging people to go to college. The Mississippi State's engineering program is incredible. We've had some graduates of that from Velma Jackson. And I know our friend Quinn Braboy also graduate of Mississippi State, doing some great things here in Jackson. So, but it's not necessarily the path for everyone.
Right. It's again, go ahead. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I got buzzed for that.
Oh,
I got buzzed by the. But
okay.
yeah, it just when me and you were coming up, we were told different things. It's not necessarily you have to go to college or nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah. And now what I'm finding a lot today, even if a role I see someone that I want to recommend for a role in my company, if I see them having the basic right skill sets and they're missing quite a few things, I say, well, just go learn it, right? Spend a month or a week on YouTube or LinkedIn Learning or any of these other websites that'll teach you, right? You just need sometimes all you need is an understanding of it. And again, if you want to get into tech, it's not necessarily that you need to go to college, 4-year college. You don't need to absorb a huge amount of loans and debt, right, to get to where you want to go. Talk to someone, right? Someone who's doing exactly what you want to do, and ask them what skills do they use on a day to day, and then go get those skills.
Yeah, well, I did want to get to a few questions.
Okay.
The first is Rihanna Kelly,
Mhm.
in 9th grade, and she asked, "Does your job ever get hard, and how do you handle it when it does?"
Uh, so when we say does my job get hard, what I do is not hard. I don't think in any role that I've ever had, the job was hard, right? I think I was either prepared for it or I knew where to get the information to do the job. Now, the difficult thing about the role sometimes is when you have multiple deadlines and you have to balance priority. I think in my case, that's the hard part about my job.
Hold on one second. Hold on one
Okay.
second. Sorry about that. I'm back.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, I think you answered that question. That was really good. This is Precious Blackman, and along the
Okay.
same lines, I think this is interesting. She goes, "What's the hardest project you've had to work on in your career?"
The most difficult project I've had to work on in my career. Uh, okay, so we'll do two. One, physically, right? I was working with engineering firm called Parsons. We were the consultants and contractors for the federal government project, and this was a project where we were installing runway lights to one of the runways in Atlanta, Georgia's airport.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
this project was difficult because one, this was the first time I'm ever doing it, and if you can imagine walking into the woods and it's just trees, and then by the time you're finished, there's a runway with lights and a building that powers those runways. And so seeing all that being built from ground up was amazing.
Wow.
The difficult part about that was weather conditions, right? A lot of times we had to work at night, right? Because you think about a live runway, you can't really shut down a runway to stop planes from coming on. So a lot of times you had to work at night. Your sleep schedule gets flipped, and then we're working in the cold. So working in January, February. Imagine it's 20 degrees. You can only work 10 to 20 minutes at a time. Jump back in the truck, warm up, jump back out. So that was probably the most physical, demanding project that I've worked on. And then, as far as kind of mentally challenging project, uh, working as in transportation automation, right? This is kind of my introduction to product management, where I'm trying to figure out how do we optimize a corridor of signal lights in conjunction with the construction that's going on, right? So we're a part of a larger project. They're redesigning the roadway, the bus stops, and everything that goes along, but we're implementing a software in that as well. So that was a difficult project as well.
Absolutely. This is Herbert Carmichael, and he asked,
Mhm.
when did you realize this was the career field you wanted to be in?
Hmm. Um, I think 2000 and what is that? 2017, 18. I realized I wanted to be in tech. This is when I was still in the Bay Area. I realized I wanted to be in tech. I realized I wanted to not only be in that space, but work with people in that space. And so, as a product manager, I get a chance to build products that customers want. And so, if you think about a product manager, any product that you have, right? I'm using AirPods right now. We most of us have cell phones. That's a product. And so my job as a product manager is to talk to people, see what they like about it, see what they don't like about it, and then build on that. And so, again, I graduated college in 2007. So you're talking about a 7 to 8 year span in which it took me to kind of figure out what I really enjoy doing. But again, like I said before, you got to be open to trying things, being exposed to different things, right? You'll never figure it out if you kind of just don't try things as you grow.
This is Derek Hutchins. He's also in ninth
Mhm.
grade, and he asked, what do you think is the most important part of your career?
Um, Relationships. Um, I think throughout my entire career, it has always been relationships. I've had jobs where I needed to transition to something else, uh, but maybe I couldn't find something. I could reach out to someone and say, "Hey, you got a project I could work on the side?" And they're just like, "Yeah, I can give you this to work on." Or I've worked with federal government. I actually left the federal government and went back. The reason why I was
Yeah,
able to go back because I had a relationship with the guy that was my manager before I left.
there you go.
He called me and said, "Hey, I got something. I know you probably don't want to do this, but it's opening. Um, you know." And I applied, got the role. All right. So I think the most important thing you can do is create relationships, learn how to talk to people, um, and just grow yourself. Mature yourself in the way you handle people, understand people, dynamic, the way you treat people. Right. I've worked in roles where I'm working with CEOs and I'm working with people who program things in the field, right? They may program controls in the field. You've got to be able to be flexible to talk, you know, the technology with someone who understands tech. You got to be able to break that technology down to someone who doesn't understand tech. You also got to be able to communicate with someone who's implementing that technology, right? So relationships, communication, I think are the two most important things in any career outside of any skill you can
Absolutely. I got time for two more. This first one is
learn. Okay.
Edward Flowers. He's a member of our band here. And he asked, in your career, how many times have you had to make a hard decision and how did you come about making it?
Mm. Oh, I probably make hard decisions quite a few times in each role. And I think so. If I'm thinking from a product manager standpoint, right, you have to make the decision on whether we move forward with building out a feature or whether we don't build it out. Right. So those are difficult decisions because on one end, customers may say, "Hey, um, we like the PCs, but we like the buttons on the left side." I'm just giving you an example, right? And you're getting a lot of customers that say that. And so now it's like, all right, do we take that risk and redesign and put money into redoing what we just created to uh, give our customers what they want, or do we leave it like it is because that doesn't serve the mass, right? So those are hard decisions. I typically have to make as a product manager, or how do we deliver bad news, right? How do you tell a customer that you quote unquote messed up something or did something wrong um, without and being able to then deliver on what you didn't deliver before. So those are difficult conversations to have, but you always want to make sure that the customer comes first.
Absolutely. I got one more. This is to Davian
Mhm.
Smith, also for our band. And he asked, what's been the hardest part about transitioning from construction into tech?
Um, the difficult part was just the road getting there. Like I said, I was in construction. I knew I wanted to get into tech at some point. Like, how do you walk into a building and say, "Hey, I want to work in tech," and they look at you and like, "Well, you've been doing construction your whole life." But I tell people, where you want to work, you can always find a way to get in there, right? I didn't know at the time. I looked at Google. Google, we think about going on our laptops and we think about searching for things, but there's an entire village and system with Google, right? So you go to a Google campus, they've got transportation engineers, they've got construction managers, right? There's so much that goes into bringing us a search engine or a Google phone or Google Buds or Pixel Watch, right? There's facilities that need to be built. There's towers that need to be built. On their campus, people have to get from one side to the next. So they have transportation engineers that plan out, their transportation routes. So even in construction, I can find my way onto a Google campus for a job, right?
Yeah.
So
And they
that's
also
not the
have the HVAC guys that have to keep the server room cool. That is one of the highest paying jobs in tech.
exactly. So HVAC, plumbing, electrical, those three will never not be needed, right? There's a demand for plumbers now, right? Because people that were doing it, that generation is retiring out, but we're not backfilling it as quickly. So you could find yourself doing plumbing on real estate, and then the next day you could find yourself doing plumbing on Google campus or Facebook campus. So it's if you I always tell people, figure out where you want to go, look at what you're doing now. How can you do what you're doing there? And then once I was able to get into tech using my construction background, what skills do I need to learn to now move into a different role? And again, that's the easiest way to get into the role that you want, leveraging your skills that you have now to learn what you need to learn once you get in there.
There you go. Now we're almost out of time, and we thank you so
Mhm.
much for taking some time for us today. But before we go, just you grew up in the city of Jackson, Mississippi, went to Jackson
Mhm.
Public Schools, Jim Hill High School, where I started my career. So all the negative connotations about if you're coming up in Jackson, things are stacked against you. But you grew up as a young black kid in Mississippi and have still become extremely successful. So
Mhm.
despite the obstacles that these kids face, why should they really consider getting into the tech engineering field and be successful like someone like you?
Um, I think growing up in Jackson is an advantage. And I didn't realize it until I moved to California, right? So you imagine going to a place where everybody thinks the same. Everybody in Silicon Valley went to Stanford and Berkeley, and they all learn the same. They all kind of walk and talk the same. But in the South, in Jackson, Mississippi, we have different circumstances that we deal with.
Yep.
So the way we use products are totally different than the way they may use products on the West Coast, right? So think about that, right? You're not at a disadvantage. You see the world a lot differently. So the way I may use a cell phone or the way I may use a computer, or I notice certain things that a PC doesn't operate right in my environment, they may not know that, right? They're so used to their world and doing things their way. When you come in with your thinking and your resilience and your background and the things you've had to deal with growing up and fighting through and overcoming, right? There's a different level of perspective that we bring. And I found that out quickly when I moved to California. People don't think like me. They don't see the world like I see it. And that's an
There you
advantage,
go.
right?
There you
Because
go.
you got a million people thinking like one, and then you got one person thinking differently than they are. Right. So again, don't think of it as a disadvantage. There's opportunities out there. Like I said, even if you want to share my LinkedIn or my contact information with your class,
Sure.
if they want to talk about anything, uh, you know, feel free to give it to them. I'm always open to talk and speak. But again, I look at it as an advantage. You know, even my accent, right? I think it becomes a talking point with people. It allow people to feel. It allows people to put their guard down when they're talking to me. Oh, you're from the South. There's a connotation about being from the South, right? You're kind, you're generous, you're helpful. I think all those things are true about growing up in Jackson, Mississippi. Those are things you learn, right? You learn a sense of, uh, just loyalty and responsibility, being in those environments. So, I think it's an advantage. You can learn whatever you need to learn at any time, but being an upstanding person and a person of character and just having those morals instilled in you from growing up in a place like Jackson, Mississippi, you can't learn those things in different parts of the country, right?
I agree. So again, we thank you so much for joining us. Really cool, all the stuff that you dealt with. So Jonathan Husband, all the way from Houston, Texas. We thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
I talk to you soon, buddy.
All right.